want to just say, introduce our guests. I think I get a sense that a lot of the audience already knows them quite well, but there might be a few people in here who don't. And also say a little bit about the occasion for bringing the two of them here. So the event tonight is part of a series called Appropriately Couples. And it's meant to reflect on artistic partnerships. And it is programming that's related to and comes out of the exhibition that's upstairs in what we call the New Contemporary Gallery, called Scenes from a Marriage, Ed and Nancy Kienholz. And thinking about Ed and Nancy's artistic and life partnership that lasted from 1972 when they first met to 1994 when Ed passed away. And unlike a lot of artistic couples in the history of art, Ed insisted that Nancy get equal billing. And so anything made by the Kienholzes from 72 to 94 says Ed and Nancy, and he was very adamant about that. And Nancy continued to have a practice of her own after Ed passed away in 94. A practice that has not been given much attention, unfortunately, and a little bit to my surprise when I started investigating it. So for those of you who remember Zenith console TVs in the living rooms of grandparents and older aunts and uncles, 70s and 80s, they were manufactured into the 90s, I learned in working on this project. That is Nancy's piece on her own from 2007 called Home Sweet Home. That has never been in a museum before. It has been shown in some commercial art galleries. And then also a wonderful lenticular piece by Nancy reflecting, it's Ed and Nancy moving back and forth and dancing. You'll know what I mean. That's also Nancy on her own. But with this idea in mind of a show about couples, what better way to think about that than to talk about couples and bring some people here. So previously, we had a wonderful conversation with Rachel Kusk and her husband, Simon Chamel-Katz. And Rachel's a well-known novelist based in Paris, and Simon is a visual artist and works in marketing. And they had much to say about their artistic partnership. But in this second episode, we have invited, and we are very pleased that they agreed, Cassandra C. Jones and Mikael Jorgensen to hear about their practices, her practice as a visual artist, his practice as a musician, and how they make it all work in the context of a marriage and their own creative practices, because it's no small task. And historically, there wasn't a lot of that. So first, a word about Cassandra. Cassandra C. Jones is an artist working nationally, but also does a lot to nurture the arts locally here in Ojai, Santa Barbara, Ventura, Santa Barbara County, and is running a very successful program, artistic residence at the Taft Gardens, and in all sorts of ways plugged in and involved and supports her local community. But while she's working locally, she's also exhibiting nationally. And I have to read this because I can't remember all the places she's had solo shows, but she's had shows in recent years in San Francisco, Pittsburgh, New York, Portland, Oregon, and yes, even Ojai. She's been all over. She's been interviewed by museums, reviewed and interviewed nationally in such publications as the LA Times, the Boston Globe, Huffington Post, Cabinet Magazine, the San Francisco Chronicle, and Santa Barbara Magazine. Similarly, Mikael is all over. He traveling and recording. He's been since 2002 a member of the band Wilco. He also performs as parts of the Expanders with Isaac Karen, and he has some solo albums such as Cheetah, and has played with Stereolab and Sea and Cake. Much as Cassandra's exhibiting nationally, Mikael is also performing nationally and has upcoming concerts in Chicago, Orlando, Birmingham, and Huntsville. So I want to give both of them a chance to talk about their individual creative practices. So they're both going to do that. So we learn more about what makes them tick as creative people. And then the three of us will sit down and talk about how they make it all happen and negotiate it. Okay. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mikael Jorgensen, and this is my wonderful wife, Cassandra C. Jones-Jorgensen. And my father was a recording engineer in New York City from 1957 through 1990, and I gained a love and curiosity of music, music production, music performance, and all of the sort of texture and fabric of making music. I learned how to use a computer with equipment that Bob gave me when I was, 12 or 14 years old, a MIDI interface for a charming old computer that you had to boot from a floppy drive that I could then sequence while other kids were out drinking beer and smoking cigarettes and watching the wall and listening to Metallica. I was at home on my keyboard, keeping it real. And I was in Bob's universe. Bob James was the guy that my dad was an engineer for at this time. And then I started playing in bands and really at a certain point made the commitment that music is what I want to do. I moved to Chicago in 1998 and got involved with the local music scene there. I helped build a recording studio, and it was there that I met Jeff Tweedy and the guys from the band Wilco, and that was 21 years ago now, which is just, it just goes by real fast, doesn't it? And it's been kind of a fever dream to have been pulled along by the Wilco mechanism all across the world playing music. And in addition to Wilco, I also am involved with other projects that I've sort of been a creative part of. One of them is called Quindar, which is a collaboration with a friend of mine named James Thomas. And we remixed the NASA Audio and Film Archives into a library. The NASA Audio and Film Archives library into a record. And we made videos and had a live show that incorporated dynamic video to the electronic music that we were making. We just released a new album only on Bandcamp at the moment. So if you go to quindar.net, you can take a listen there. And I was just going to play some of so this is me at the Wilco Loft in Chicago, surrounded by my best friend's equipment. This was during the recording sessions for the album called The Whole Love back in 2011 when my son Kai was just, I can't remember if he was born or not at that point. It was right around then. And this is a shot of us taken by the great photographer in Chicago, Jamie Kelter Davis, echoing the great Richard Avedon with a really beautiful photo. I think it's one of my favorites of all the Wilco promo photos that we've taken over the years. And but this first video that I'd like to play is a piece that I invited some friends from the time when I was living in Brooklyn from 2006 to 2012 to come to Ojai and write a song and go up into the Los Padres National Forest and record and film it on location. So what you'll see is a live recording, but in a very unlikely place with very unlikely instruments. And that is this.
Stretched by
Well, thank you. That's right after we came back down the mountain from this, I was struck. I was like, I want to do this over and over and over again. But I came home, said goodbye to those guys, dropped off the equipment, and Cassandra and I went straight to a birth class here in Santa Barbara to prepare for the arrival of our youngest son, Milo. And so the next video is a Quindar composition from the album that we put out in 2016 called Hip Mobility, which as I get older is becoming more of a less ironic of a title and more of a again, this the music and some of the audio and the sort of found sounds and all the video comes from the NASA archives, and I think it's probably just easier to call it kind of a meditation on, technology in the late 60s. And so this is a song called Twin Pole Sunshade, which was the name of a device that was sent up to, after Skylab was launched, there was a problem with the insulation. And so they had to send up basically a big metal foil umbrella to keep it cool, because the astronauts who were inside of Skylab were like, it was like 105 degrees inside the space capsule. So can you imagine being in zero gravity, thousands of miles over the Earth, and it's like really hot. So, so this is a Twin Pole Sunshade from Quindar.
Show our video.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a. I'm Cassandra.
This is my wife, Cassandra.
Can you hear me? Okay. So we have. We don't normally collaborate on each other's work, although we are a sounding board a lot of the time. And Michael often takes a lot of my photos for my collage work. I used to use a ton of stock photography, and that became very problematic after a while. And so. And Michael's an amateur or a budding photographer and passionate, happy.
Amateur. I don't get paid for it.
Yeah, but he often helps me with that. But we also teach a class together that we developed for Stanford, and we want to show you our commercial for the class that we developed it for Stanford, and then a bunch of other schools started asking us to come and do it. We've taught at Oak Grove in Ojai and Thatcher in Ojai. We're talking to Interlochen right now. We might go and do it there this summer. And so this is, we'll show you our commercial for it because it's kind of fun. And then we'll show you some of our student work, and it's very short. As long as the sound is there. So I teach the kids how to animate in Photoshop, which is actually not a great way to animate, but it's a great way to teach them how to use Photoshop to make them make frames over and over and over and over and over again. And so when they leave our class, they've got enough to be a danger to themselves. And then Michael teaches them how to remix music to go with it. And we use all the archives, just like in the Quindar videos, we use the same archives from NASA for their source material. And we'll show you some of that work.
And one of the things that we do is we have them make an 8-second animation and then have them make an 8-second piece of music, and then we string them all together, kind of Exquisite Corpse style, and it's a psychedelic free-for-all here, so.
Yeah. This is what we did up at Thatcher, our most recent class. Great fun is had by all.
Yeah, closing credits. And I'm going to turn it over to Cassandra. Thank you.
So how to do this? Okay, so when people ask me, when I say, oh, I'm an artist, people say, what do you do? And I say, are you a painter? And no. I make large-scale collage that often ends up as wallpaper installations. This was one of my very first wallpaper pieces that looked very traditional. It's since evolved, but this was a piece that was shown in Ojai at the Nathan Larramendi Gallery years ago. I think it was 2004, and it was called Good Cheer. And it was based on the fact that I was a cheerleader for 2 weeks, a very short stint as a cheerleader in Catholic school. And there was this kind of ethical ambiguity of being in Catholic school and not being able to wear your skirt above your knees, but the cheerleaders could wear short skirts here and crop tops, but nobody else was allowed to. And so my parents pulled me out of the school for many reasons, but part of it was that it wasn't, they were like, didn't you want to be an artist? and so I left Catholic school, had to quit cheerleading, and ended up at the LA County High School for the Arts, which was a far better choice, that better path for me. But years later, when I was in grad school, somebody asked me about it, and I got to thinking about it again, and how interesting it is, how interesting cheerleaders, how much joy it brought me, and how interesting it is that these young girls throw their legs up in the air and flaunt their briefs. And it was a sort of this perfect combination of family values and pornography or erotica, and I wanted to explore that. So I made this piece called Good Cheer. It kind of surrounds you in this sort of ethical ambiguity. And these are some close-ups, and they're all the crotch shot. And you can see some, and they're very small. They're teeny tiny. You really have to, when you walk in the gallery, you really have to get up close to see this. And this piece this was kind of started my career. It showed in 25 places all over the country. And there's Michael in 2007 at a show I had at the San Jose Institute for Contemporary Art. And he matched the piece. I always love this photo. And then I went on to make other wallpapers. This one is called Rara Avis, and I was thinking about at the time how we bring nature into the home in these sort of artificial ways, these safe ways, including wallpaper. And this is made entirely of flamingos. These are all their legs. It's not the clearest image, but this pattern ended up being this giant. This is the floor here, and a person would stand about here. And this big faded, the wallpaper faded at the end. And this is essentially one big giant Photoshop file that I had printed out. And people would come into the space and be like, what is it? And they couldn't figure out how I had done that. But it really was just all done in the computer. And everything I do is done in Photoshop. Everything. This is a more recent commission that was, I had been to a dinner party, a Wilco dinner, like a post-show Wilco dinner that was hosted by some fans 10 years before I was commissioned to do this. And one of the women at that dinner took my card and had put it up on her desk for 10 years staring at it thinking, what can I do with her? And so you never know. Let's bring that card, you never know. But she called me 10 years later and said, I'm starting an art hotel in Baltimore, and I want you to do something. And the hotel's called Revival. And it's about bringing the past into the future and sort of combining the two. And can you think of something and propose something to do for the space? And I did some research, and I found out that the quilting style in Baltimore really looked like my work. And so they're called Baltimore album quilts, and they had these very blocky colors and shapes that really looked like what I was doing. So I proposed that I would recreate the Baltimore album quilts that were essentially stories by women using my own stories. And so I made, this is one of the traditional designs. And what's behind all these designs, there's just like this lexicon of symbology. And there's all these beautiful books written about these designs. And so it was great fun to research. And this is my version. I don't know if you can tell, but there are things in this that were very personal and some that were not so personal, like the reason that these are mylar balloons making up these flowers. And the reason they look like petals is because Michael and I had taken the photos in our living room of these balloons, and you could see our reflections in them with the window in the back. So it gave them kind of the pistil of the flower, the center of the flower. And these are silly straws and mylar balloons, and they're Bitcoin, because that's the prize we all thought we wanted at the time. And this is a traditional cornucopia that was present in those quilts. This is my cornucopia. This is made up of hot air balloons and all these things that cornucopia was meant to be like a show of the harvest, of your abundance, of your bounty. And these days, our bounty is that we can order anything from Amazon and have it in 2 days or less. So there's like a Halloween costume and some Christmas ornaments and yoga balls and all these things. So my modern day take on that, this is a heart, very, very traditional quilting heart for that style. And this was mine, made of beach balls. This was the full design. And then a lovely thing happened, which is that it became a full-on selfie wall. And every day I get pings on this one. People take photos, and there's just some of the most beautiful people in the world are in Baltimore. So it's very exciting. So I don't just make wallpaper. I also do large-scale collage. This is a bear that I made this is the size of it, actually. This is about how big it is. And it's made up of birds. It's called, the piece title, you can see the birds, their heads here and their wings. The title of the piece is called The Accumulation of Nameless Energies, which is lifted from a passage from the book White Noise by Don DeLillo. And it's this beautiful passage, one of my favorite passages of all time, about these two people are talking about going to see the most famous barn in America. And you start seeing the signs for the barn as you're coming down the road, and you get there, and the barn is blocked by photographers, and when one photographer leaves, another one takes their place, and these two people are having a conversation about it, and they say they're not there to capture an image, but to maintain it. And he says, can't you feel it? It's like an accumulation of nameless energies. And I love that idea of I made this piece around the time that Donald Trump was elected, and I was just watching our country divide and thinking about how we come together on certain issues and how we're in or we're out or whatever. And so I just like the idea of thinking like the bear does not exist if the birds are not together. And so that's, I think another subject matter that that falls into my work a lot is my grapple with our modern day relationship to the environment. It's very challenging and tricky. I don't know how to be an environmentalist anymore. When I was young, I had so many great intentions, and now it's just so complicated. And And everything we do seems to be hurtful in some way. But so this is the photograph I started this piece from. Just want to give you a little sort of view behind the curtain. And this is what it ended up being. And this was really had a lot to do with me living in Ojai and watching our lake drop 3 stories, like a 3-story building, since I had moved there. And it was basically water becoming a luxury item. And then this beach ball, I use a lot in my work, and I made an entire show based on this beach ball. And I'll tell you why, but I wanted to show you what this is all from. So this is the wallpaper piece that was made from the beach ball. And this started because of the Thomas Fire, and I'm sure many of you were here during that time. And when that fire blew through Ojai, and we had come back, I was trying to describe to myself in writing for posterity what the ash on the mountain looked like outside my window. And I couldn't describe it. I still can't describe it to you today. And then I started thinking, well, like, what's in it? What's in that ash? And is all of our modern day technology, our toys, our computers, our synthetic clothes, our this, is our that, is it gone, or is it in that ash? And I was thinking about the cactus, the brand new cactus coming up out of the ground up in the mountains, and how they would be, whatever's in that ash, they would be absorbing on a sort of subatomic level and wrapping their watery flesh around that ash, and they would never know a life without these sort of sinister bits that are in whatever went up in great big plumes and rained back down on our town. So this was the background for this piece. The wallpaper piece was the background. And then the foreground was I made these cactus forms out of this beach ball. And I chose the beach ball specifically for many reasons, but one of the reasons was that it's lightweight, it's buoyant, it holds breath. It takes this thing that is our life force, and you put it inside an object, and it becomes something. It's also bright and colorful, and if I twist it a certain way, I can get these beautiful gradients from it, which also looks like the white parts look like spines. And so it was the perfect object to make these cactus with. Here's sort of a close-up of it. And I made a whole series of them. And then this was the installation. So the entire installation was made out of this one beach ball. And then after that, we got hit with the pandemic. Yay! And I was sitting in my house with my husband, who normally is touring, and my children, who are normally at school. And I was doom scrolling, and I was freaking out and thinking, oh my God, and like watching our political environment go crazy and watching this epic rise in plastic because for our own safety, right? We started packaging everything in just hyper amounts of plastic. And I had this idea that I wanted to talk about that. I didn't know how I felt about it. I didn't know how I was going to grapple with it, but I wanted to talk about it, and I didn't know it. So I knew I wanted to make a botanical series, but I didn't know anything about plants. And 6 years prior, I had discovered this place called Taft Gardens that was 10 minutes from my house, and my studio neighbors worked there. So I got this idea in my head. This is a picture of Taft Gardens. It's stunning, amazing place. All the plants there are from South Africa or Australia, so a bunch of weird stuff. And I got this idea, and I thought, if I don't put this down on paper right this second, it's not going to happen. So I made a very unsolicited proposal. I took it to my neighbors. It had a thesis statement, a resume, like, here's my project, here's what I can do for you if you let me do my project on your land. And I was basically only asking for 3 months of time, because it's $20 a pop to go. Every time you go up there, it's $20. And you only get 2 hours. And I wanted to go up there for days on end for 3 months. And I wanted to do it for free. And so I made this proposal, and I took it to them, and they took it to the CEO of Taft Gardens, and she thought it was a great idea. And she said, well, we were thinking about doing a residency program. And I said, well, I can teach you how to build a residency program because I've done tons of residencies if you let me have a residency. And so I ended up spending 7 months there. This was my residency boyfriend, the bottle tree, which Michael threatened to chop down with a chainsaw at some point. This was my inspiration. This is one day of collecting the different kinds of flowers that were at Taft. And I started, and when we discovered Taft, Michael had gone up there. He was scouting to make a music video. And I just tagged along that day. And I was walking around and I was like, is this someone's yard? Like, what is this weird place? And I picked up one of these seed pods. And this is called a Banksia pod. And I thought it was funny. I thought that these little bits on here looked like Muppet Mouths. And these are the leaves of it. And I just thought they were the coolest thing. And I thought, oh, I got to do a project here. I just don't know. I don't even know who owns this place. I don't know what it would be, but I kind of made a wish on it. Like, someday I'm going to do a project here. So I got my chance. I got to do the project. And this is the piece I made based on that Banksia piece. I called up my dear friend Joel Fox. I said, do you have any Muppets I can borrow? And he said, yes, I have a whole box of Muppets. And the box said Christian Muppets on it, which I thought was really funny. Anyway, so these are pennant flags that are felt. And it's hard to see, but they're sort of tied on the corners. And this is the collage made of the Muppet Mouths. You can see a close-up of that. But Taft also has these just incredible protea flowers that come up every year. They're blooming right now. And these are called leucospermums, or pincushion flowers, and they're very plasticky. And they're only propagated by wildflower. You can't just grow them. You actually have the ants take their little seeds down into the ground, and you have to have fire come through for them to propagate. So a lot of people, a lot of nurseries will grow them in smoke-impregnated paper. And it became my spirit flower while I was there. And this is the wallpaper. This is how my wallpaper has now evolved, is that this is the pattern. They're giant pieces. So this was a wallpaper piece. Again, back to, I was talking about plastic going into the ground in all sorts of ways, and coming up on a subatomic level. So human stuff coming up through the plants on a very molecular level. And so this is made out of Mardi Gras beads and slinkies. This is a flower called a grevillea, also became sort of a dear friend while I was there. This is the piece I made based on the grevillea. It's a very small piece, but you can see here's a close-up. These are mylar, number 9 mylar balloons, quilting pins, alligator birthday balloons, and the ribbons. This is a button cactus, and the piece that I made based on the button cactus was, I made a whole series of cactus made from emojis. I don't know if you can see that those are emojis. But at the time, I was going through some family stuff, and our couples therapist was saying that she's like, oh man, if I had $1 for everyone's whose relationship was ruined by a text message, and we spent a lot of time talking about how emojis are just not a great representation of the human, of what you're trying to get across. And I was thinking a lot about who you get stuck with in family life and in the garden as well. So this is the emoji cactus. There's a close-up of them. Balloons show up in my work a lot. And this one is called Blooming. I know it's a silly name, but again, this is an object that takes our life force, and you put it inside that object, and it's buoyant, and it's fun, and it makes you happy, and there's something sort of almost primal about it, you know. And I love this idea of this beautiful blooming, but then there's something disturbing about cutting that balloon in half. And that's kind of like sort of sums up my feeling about how to be an environmentalist. Like, I want to care. I don't know how. And there's a very like sort of cutting inadequacy, I feel, trying to navigate that. And so that's one of those. And then this is another one. This is a latex plant made with latex balloons. And latex is one of these wonderful things that does biodegrade, and it's pretty environmentally friendly, but it's all the pigments and the metals that go into the balloons to make them shiny that doesn't go away. And so I thought about the latex plant giving this latex, but then reabsorbing the other things we put in the latex. This is a snake made of sixes. And it doesn't seem evil. It's a biblical reference, and it doesn't seem, it sort of seems sort of happy. But it's all made out of sixes mylar balloons. And this is a bee, also made of mylar balloons. Does everyone know what ASCII is? Where you could make an image with using like dashes and numbers and letters. And so this is an ASCII bee made out of mylar balloons. And then the last one is the bunny rabbit, which is all the same premise. So that's it. Thank you so much. Should we take a light?
So thank you. Oh wait, I'm gonna turn this thing back on. Thank you both very much for giving us a sense of your practice, the practices that your marriage supports. And they're both. I've got some questions, but my first one is let's get to the really important questions. How did you two meet? Come on, everybody. I get that question with my partner.
Most fabulous place ever. We met backstage at an Arcade Fire show.
In New York City?
In New York City at the Judson Memorial Church, which we...
Oh, wow, Judson, okay.
Yeah, which is where we got married.
Oh, okay.
It was really fun to tell his religious relatives in Europe that we met in church. Really, we met
it wasn't a lie.
It wasn't a lie.
Had they Googled Judson Memorial, otherwise, but...
We have our last name back.
But I had a budding something with one of the guys in that band that I had met at a residency when I was in Canada, and it wasn't going very well, and I knew it. But he introduced something to me that was really intriguing, which was that he went away. He went on tour, and I had never considered that I could be with someone who would give me time to do what I do. And being in a relationship with a musician that went on tour allowed that to happen. And so as this relationship was not working out very well, I was in the background praying to God going, I know this is weird, but can you please send me someone who goes away and comes back that I can trust? And that's what I got. We met backstage, and we were engaged 6 weeks later.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you must have shaped each other's sensibilities. And one thing I've noticed, it kind of clicked as I was looking at these presentations, is you both take found patterns in the world, whether they're auditory or visual, and you're both really good at like unraveling them and like weaving them back together. And I imagine being on a car trip with the two of you must be fascinating. Like, do you observe different, are you back and forth like observing and noticing things? Or there's a shared attentiveness to the world and to the things as are kind of presented to us. But with that, both of you seem to have this shared ability to think of it as being otherwise and reverse it and unwind it and repeat it.
We do have a really good banter. We share a lot of the same aesthetics.
Okay.
And we both are total comedy buffs.
Okay.
We, speaking of road trips, we used to have to, because we have 2 children, we would have to go to Los Angeles. We would go like to an event or something in LA and leave the kids behind, and that's when we would catch up. Because we never, the household gets too busy, And during the pandemic, we started having these sessions in his studio where we would talk for hours about everything we were thinking and everything we were working on, and we called them our drives to LA because we couldn't do those anymore. But yeah, we talk about everything. I don't think there's anything we've ever worked on that we're not sharing with each other or sort of getting each other's feedback on.
So who's the better editor?
Like visually, or
okay,
or with words.
With visually, I think I know. but you both bring different aesthetics. So which?
Cassandra's absolutely the better editor.
Okay.
But I think during the pandemic, I, for the first time, was home for a consistent amount of time for the first time since we met, to be home and confronted a lot of personal stuff and also a lot of creative stuff and stuff. I don't mean to lose all the technical lingo here. Stuff. But just working on projects that had been sort of germinated before the pandemic happened, and kind of finding my voice in that process in a way that was very unusual and new to me. And I realized that I know this sounds really ridiculous, I could make creative choices that mattered, if that makes any sense. And I was like, oh, there's stuff that I do that isn't good, but it's not a bad thing because you just have to keep making and making and making, and then you look at what you've got and then, okay, no, that's worth holding on to. Not that I'm going to delete or get rid of it, but just like, let's put this other stuff aside. And it was the first time that I had, because I think it comes from playing in a band where so much is outside of my control, outside of my I don't even know half the deals that are going on behind the scene, not behind the scenes, but just, the sort of the mechanics of having to put a tour together or put a record out, and all these sorts of things are very much hidden from me. And so it was the first time that I was able to finally sit down and be like, oh, I have to do stuff. I have to make stuff, because all of a sudden my income just went away in a flight home from Canada one day. And then it was like, oh, well, who are you, dude? And, Cassandra is the master organizer. Everything has its place, and every image is, I know where that is. I know where that is on her computer. And I, I've always been very inspired by that somewhat rigorous attention to being organized so that when you need an asset, whether it's an image or a video or a sound or a reference of a piece of music, like you kind of know where it is, then you can bring it in, and then you can make a creative decision about it. And I absolutely credit Cassandra for kind of helping me, indirectly as it may have been, but it was definitely, I was very much inspired by her reduction of, like you can see in all of those images, at some point that Photoshop file was a complete hot mess. Yeah. And then, picking away and like, oh, it's sculpting something. And I was like, oh, I think I did this with music, but I don't know that it was like as sort of intentional. It was sort of accidental. It was like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. But then I was like, oh wait, it can even go further and refine that process. So yeah, Cassandra's the better editor, to answer your question.
Well, certainly with writing, great. I'm forgetting Raymond Carver's editor. Someone in the audience will know. But a lot of great editing is just like, no. This, and this, yes. It can be really hard if you're inside of it and making it to do that. But someone who's outside and believes in you and who's sympathetic can come in and say,
it's a handy person to have.
Oh, it's dreamy,
real
right?
Handy person to have.
Is that a two-way street?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say it's a pretty rare day that one of us won't be asking the other person, what do you think of this? And
that's really nice.
And I mean, that's the fun. That's where, if that doesn't happen, I'm sad.
So I could keep hogging the questions till the cows come home, to mix my metaphors. But we don't have a lot of time together, and I wanted to open this up to the audience. I know many of you know the two of them well, but some of you maybe don't. Or maybe you have some insights that you've gleaned from their presentation. So if there are questions for Cassandra and Michael, please. Lauren's got a microphone, or belt it out. Oh.
Her son has a question.
Are you?
Okay.
I thought it was a concert that you met at, not a church.
Oh,
The concert
thank
was
you.
in
The
church.
the concert was in the church.
Filling in the personal history gaps here, everybody.
Hi, guys. As another artistic couple, I'm wondering how you balance just time. Like with having two kids, we only have one, and there's just a constant pull to have the time to do your art. And so I'm curious how you balance that.
I can start
Go
to
for
answer
it.
that question. Michael and I have a very verbal, strong agreement. And this is the agreement I recommend when I meet young women who are of that age where they are, they've found a significant other. And I always tell them the same thing, make sure you have this agreement if you want to be an artist. The agreement is that our careers pretty much come first. I mean, our kids come first, I'll say that. But beyond that, beyond their health and well-being, if I have a show coming up, Michael's like, go to your studio and do that. If he's got a tour coming up, it's go do that. There's only one time in our entire relationship that I ever asked Michael to come home, and that was at the beginning of the pandemic. And fair, right?
Yeah, she was right on that.
I just spent, Shauna Moulton is in the audience, and I just spent a month up at Taft with Shauna. I came home to see the kids every once in a while. And right before that, I had gone to a residency on San Juan Island for 18 days. And, there was never you're going to be gone that long? What about this you have to do or that you have to do? It's never that. It's always like, yes, of course, go do that. And we never have to tell the other person, here's the things you're going to have to do in my absence. We just know the things that need to get done. And that is how we have structured our relationship. Now, that's not to say that it's easy. We, sometimes our projects overlap, and we have to figure it out. We moved to Ojai to be closer to my parents, and they help a lot. Thank God, thank you. They're here. And it's so lovely that our children and my parents can witness each other's lives because of that. But if that agreement went away, we would have major issues because neither of us are really willing to give up our practices, and that is what we are attracted to each other by. I am attracted to the fact that he has prioritized his music, and that's what he wants to do all the time. He's attracted to that. When I make a new piece, that's a source of joy. It's never a source of resentment or, oh, that's what took your time. Even if it's bad, thank God. Because I make bad work on occasion.
I've never seen it.
Thank you. But yeah, that we have to have that in place.
And another part of that is that I know my schedule usually about 6 months out, sometimes a little further. And it's not 9 to 5 days a week for 50 weeks of the year. It's very sort of concentrated, touring for 3 weeks on, a couple weeks off, come home, go back out on the road for 2 weeks. Everybody in the band, most everybody in the band has family, spouses, kids, and I think that there's been lessons learned by watching other groups and other bands who travel pretty relentlessly, that their home life and their family lives just disintegrate because they're just not around. Even though they're out earning a living and supporting everybody, it's just that connection isn't there. And so that's one element of the touring component and the recording component that is pretty humane. That it's not, okay, you made a new record, you're going out for 6 months straight. I know guys who have done that and they just come back shell-shocked. And so part of what is helpful is that we know, we're going to be going to Europe in August for 3 weeks.
There's a heads up.
We'll be home for 2 weeks, and then we can kind of plan everything around that. And sometimes it changes, but more often than not, once we learn about it, it's been contracted and everything is in place, and there's maybe a show or two will be added or something, but it's not like a significant change. So it's pretty reliable, and that is something that I'm very grateful for, that our management and booking and the machinery behind all that it's what we want to do, is go out and tour and do it in a way that is humane and that also preserves our family existences.
We share a very robust calendar.
Yeah, there are several levels to the calendar.
Yeah, a lot of color.
Yeah, a lot of color coding, indeed.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Since you've both been home together during the pandemic, has there ever been kind of conflict or a challenge trying to get work done when you're both together in the same space?
We managed our home life the same way we managed his touring life and our travel life. We've kept a really good calendar even in the pandemic, and when one of us has something coming up, we know it. And so very often our day will look like, we'll get up, we'll get the kids ready for school, we'll get them off, and then we'll walk into the kitchen and someone will say, "What is your day today?" And if there's nothing on the calendar, "What are your needs?" Comes up a lot, those words, "What are your needs?" And we mean by that, what are your time needs? And we'll kind of weigh what takes priority, who's got what coming up. But when the kids are in school, that's our time to work. So we can go do whatever we got to do, go to our different studios or work at home. We both have a sort of an office at home that we work in, and then we both have studios outside the house that are next to each other. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes we have to bring the kids. Sometimes it gets messy. Sometimes we fight over it. Sometimes we have to call in reinforcements. But for the most part, like our common goal is that everyone gets their work done. We're in full support all the time, no matter what it is. Even if it's not something that we're getting paid to do, it's all working towards whatever it is our goal. So
There's a question up front.
So quick question. What does a fight look like between you? Kidding.
we are always refining that.
So 2 questions, and this is not on the couple side, this is more on the creative side. Cassandra, given the fact that you're kind of au courant in terms of looking at the political or whatever's going on in the environment, is there anything new, and what is it that you're working on? And same thing for Michael.
Oh, yeah.
What new projects, if any, are you working
on? I have 2 little things coming up, which are kind of exciting. For those who don't know, my Taft residency turned into a full-blown residency program. I was the first artist. The second year we took 2 artists. This year we have 8 artists up there. We have a fundraiser coming up on May 6th. Shauna Moulton will perform. She's our invitational artist this year. So I'm running I'm advising a residency program up there, but I'm also making work there still. The gardens are still an inspiration to me. It's 10 minutes from my house. It's someplace I can go when I need to get out and do something outside of my studio. So I have decided to, in collaboration with Taft, we are renovating their public bathrooms and turning them into 2 little galleries. And I'm wallpapering them with my newest botanical wallpaper, which will go up May 6th. And then in June, what's that? They're going to be artful bathrooms. And when you see them, they look like little galleries. They're kind of a perfect thing for that. And then in June, I'm going to have a pop-up show with my friend Joel Fox, who's also in the audience, at a house in Ojai. And it's only going to be out for 4 days, but it will be an experience. So we'll invite you all to that.
Okay. And then I am leaving next week to play some shows with Wilco in Chicago, New York, and then we're all going to Iceland together for 3 shows there. And then I come home, and then we do a couple more weeks of touring in the South. And then I will sort of continue work on a very new lane of work, and it is I'm directing a documentary on a guy named Bob James, who's a jazz keyboard player, and he was the guy that my dad worked with exclusively from 1975 until 1990. I went to go see Bob perform for the first time in 30 years at the Catalina Jazz Club in LA around Halloween last year. And on the drive home, I was like, I can't believe there's not a doc on this guy, you know? And then a little bit more investigation. I know that his music has been sampled pretty heavily by hip hop, but I didn't realize that he's the 2nd most sampled artist in all of hip hop. The first being James Brown, who arguably incepted hip hop. So I contacted Bob. And first I talked to a friend, and he's like, oh, you should talk to a producer friend of mine. And he does music docs. And I was like, okay. And I called him up, and I was like, yeah, I think there should be a documentary on Bob James, thinking that like he'll find a director and producer, and like it'll just happen, and I won't have to think about it or do it. And he's like, you're gonna direct it. Okay. I'm gonna do it. And I've loved movies growing up, and I've always watched behind the scenes and the special features and the bonus features on movies, and I process as like, you know, as a sort of a drug to me. Any YouTube video about how somebody made a movie or made a record or do whatever it is, like people talking about how they do what it is that they're really great at is just, to me, is like the best information to get, because it just all gets filed away somewhere. And now I get to do it, and it's an incredibly meaningful project. I've known Bob since I was little. I went to his concerts. I went to the recording studio. There's a photo of me at the console in 1979 when I was probably like 8 years old. And Bob has been approached by multiple parties, and I'm the only one that he said yes to. And it's been a very meaningful reconnection. My dad passed away in 2003 and my mom in 2004. And so there's stories and personal history that's going to get filled in the process. And I also get to tell the story of this like incredibly prolific, he's made 60 solo records and worked on almost as many as a sideman arranger. And we started filming a month ago. I went to the Blue Note in New York City, where Bob was playing with the hip hop artist Talib Kweli, and playing some of the music that has been sampled by the hip hop community with DMC from Run DMC, Slick Rick, Rakim, Talib. And I got to interview all those people. And I also was able to interview DJ Premier and Large Professor and Pete Rock and Static Selecta at a round table. What's that? DMC. Yeah, no, I mentioned him. Yeah, DMC. And it was like a fever dream. Like, I can't believe that this is what's happening in my life right now. And I've had to meet with editors and sort of consider this whole new realm of filmmaking as something that like I've always wanted to do it, and like I get to sort of scratch that itch with this incredibly meaningful project, and a project that I think, if we do it right, will resonate with a broad audience and not just music nerds. just trying to figure out who is this guy. I know him, and I know the kind of person he is. I know the music he's made, and it's music that I've been listening to my entire life. So it's part of like my DNA to a certain degree. And I'm so thrilled, and it's been really meaningful to connect with him and to sort of feel the trust that he's placed in me with this project. And so it's wild. 6 months ago, if you told me that I was going to be like talking to editors in Los Angeles about footage that I shot of me interviewing DMC from Run DMC, I'd be like, come on. But here we are, and I'm showing up for it. It's really exciting. So,
Well, I think let's end on a high note. I think we're both I'm working forward to both projects. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you for having us. We
And I think
appreciate it.
you've given us a model for how to do this as a couple.